Hello everyone and welcome. Make a cup of your favorite drink and get comfortable because this is a wonderful time for new stories from Yellowcat. Send your own stories in the comments below and maybe they'll be in our new video. Lawyers of Reddit, what was the weirdest case you've worked on? I had a case where the plaintiff told me he caught Adolf Hitler and that he won the Medal of Honor. His attorney missed court a lot, once because her pet duck had a nostril infection. The transaction was for approximately $6 million, and when I asked him whether he had applied for financial help, he stated that he'd asked an Irishman for a loan. He could not identify the specific Irishman. This case lasted in the NYS Supreme Court from 1995 to 2015. I miss it. It was so much fun. I'll give you two. One, older one that I've posted about before. Someone is fired from her job because of failure to comply with tasks and is denied unemployment. Our defense is that she was pregnant. My client told me some other crazy S that was going on at the workplace. Discovery confirmed what my client told me, that her workplace was a front for a proper compound and that they were demanding she do military-style drills while pregnant. Unemployment still denied. Thanks, North Carolina. 2. Of my current caseload, I have a pending trial that includes allegations of an assault with a deadly weapon. The deadly weapon in question is a 20-inch box fan. Allegedly, the box fan was swung around via the electric cable like a flail before someone was struck in the head. My first reaction to it was pretty simple. Where can I buy a box fan with a cable that strong? Not a lawyer, but one of the car dealerships my dad worked for had a commercial in the 80s where they used a guy dressed up in a gorilla outfit and the dealership had a whole jungle theme. In one of the commercials, they said come on down and get a new whatever car it was for 10,000 bananas. Some guy showed up with a truck full of 10,000 bananas the next week and wanted the car. It ended up in court and the banana guy won from it being deemed false advertisement. Every lawyer worth his or her salt has a pro se plaintiff story. All of them are probably the lawyer's weirdest. Mine is no different. Pro se plaintiff sued an engineer who performed a home inspection following severe winds in Texas and wrote a report for the insurer that no wind damage occurred. She sued the engineer. Now, no lawyer would take the case because it was frivolous and lawyers get sanctioned for filing frivolous lawsuits, so she filed it herself. In that petition, she outlined a ceiling fan coming loose on her cat, that she had a summer wardrobe that got soot on it from... I have no idea. The name of her dog. She also said that sometimes her dog would act up and she would roll up a newspaper and teach her dog a lesson, but rest assured, she loved her dog, that she was a good Christian woman and sang in her church, her favorite color was pink, and 63 other pages of facts that, as you have guessed, have absolutely nothing to do with wind or engineering. Her case was dismissed because she did not attach an affidavit Texas requires when you sue an engineer. She did not let that go. Nope. She filed an appeal. She lost that appeal. She filed a petition to the Supreme Court, alleging that the Court of Appeals had no effing idea what they were doing, that they were super corrupt and in league with the trial court judge to deprive her of her rights. The Supreme Court denied to get her review. She then filed about 6 more insane things with the Supreme Court and the Court of Appeals before they threatened to hold her in contempt if she filed anything else of a frivolous nature. So some $50,000 in legal fees, and a year of time later, there was a final end to it all. Legal fees would have only been $3,500 or so if we ended with the dismissal. This is why any lawyer worth his or her salt would much prefer to deal with another lawyer on the other side. The insane amount of unnecessary legal fees expended in dealing with pro se plaintiffs is egregious. Yes, they are easy cases to win, but they take a lot of effort that, frankly, I'd rather spend on Reddit or something. While I generally agree that I prefer dealing with an attorney on the other side to a party representing him/herself, when it comes to family law cases, having a pro se party on the other side often leads to much greater results for your client, or at least that has been my experience. A few examples that non-lawyers might find interesting. In one case, my client's spouse moved out of state with the couple's child. She had primary custody in the middle of the case without getting my client's permission or permission from the court. She had no idea she was not allowed to do so, though any attorney would have told her immediately. My client ended up reporting her as having abducted the child and getting sole custody. Had she simply requested permission from the court prior to moving, it would have been granted and my client would only have gotten to see his kid over school breaks. I've won numerous restraining order hearings because a pro se party had no idea what questions to ask in cross-examination or what to say, or often more importantly not say, during the hearing. I once witnessed a case where a wife requested a restraining order against her husband with absolutely no justifiable reason or evidence to support it. She was clearly doing it to try to get an advantage for child custody purposes. Had the husband simply sat there and said absolutely nothing, the judge would have denied the restraining order. However, when he was given the chance to cross-examine her, the husband asked the wife if she had cheated on him, which is completely irrelevant, particularly as we are in a no-fault divorce state. When she denied it, he screamed at her that she was a effing lying C and took a step toward her as if he wanted to hit her. He was quickly restrained by the bailiff, and not only was the restraining order granted, he was arrested. I'm sure he lost custody of the kids as well. If he had been represented by an attorney, he'd have won the hearing easily. My favorite was a divorce/child custody trial I had against a pro se husband/father. For what it's worth, he was a deadbeat dad who was much more concerned about money than his child. He clearly believed that by watching courtroom TV shows and movies, he knew how a trial would work. When it was his turn to testify, he started by launching into a story that had nothing to do with the case. I objected to pretty much everything he said, either as hearsay or irrelevant. His responses to my valid objections included, "Your Honor, I'm trying to make my case, and I'm getting to my point, you'll see." The judge sustained all of my objections, and the guy kept trying to continue with his stories anyway, leading the judge threatening to hold him in contempt. Eventually, he got so flustered and angry that he just gave up trying to testify and sat with his head down. He didn't try to object to anything my client said, even though plenty of her testimony could have been excluded as inadmissible. He ended up getting about 6 hours of visitation with his kid per month and an ass-load of child support. The amount of money he would have spent hiring a barely competent attorney, even for the single appearance, would have been more than made up for in child support savings within a few months. New York City teacher has to go to jury duty. While going through security, his backpack is found to have a cigarette box stuffed with 20 glassine envelopes of heroin. Because he has tenure, he is entitled to a hearing where he is obviously fired. He files a lawsuit to get the termination reversed, and succeeds! Thank God for appeals. Our appeal wins and the decision is reversed, so the heroin addict thankfully is not teaching your kids. I had a case where a drug dealer client referred another drug dealer my way for representation on his drug dealing charges. This is all quite some time ago and largely contained in police reports and courtroom testimony, so there's nothing privileged here. He comes to my office, we sit down and exchange pleasantries, and he starts to spin out his yarn. He starts by saying, "I don't know if you know this, but you're kind of a big deal," I say with a bit of a wink and a nod. "Exactly," he says, dead serious. I die a little on the inside. He goes on to tell me that he and his wife were preparing to go on a vacation down to Vegas, but before heading to the airport, they decided that they need to wash their dog and eat some magic mushrooms. Apparently, the dog escaped from the shower and broke their glass shower door, which left a huge bleeding gash on my client's arm. Seeing that they were to be late to the airport, they threw everything they needed into a suitcase, did a line of blow, and headed off. At the airport, TSA notices my client acting suspiciously in the security line, in that he is bleeding from an open wound and gnashing his jaw like he's working through a pack of Big League Chew in one go. They take him aside and search his luggage. Inside, they find 10 to 20K of loose cash and a pile of blood-covered clothes, as well as an apothecary bag full of uppers, downers, ciders, and everything else you would need for a trip to Vegas. In the little security detention area, my client decides that he's hot and takes his pants off. For some reason, this also necessitates him to stand on the bench where he should be sitting. This is how the real police found him on the handoff from TSA. So we're back in my office now. This guy is buttoned up, white collar, long black, high quality trench, sober disposition, besides the incredibly obvious cocaine-induced narcissism. "I want to take this to the mat," he exclaimed, fueled by righteous indignation. "I need you to beat this for me." You see, the problem with narcissism, true unmedicated cocaine-fueled narcissism, is that it is impossible for the narcissist to be wrong. It is incredibly difficult to represent someone like this. Eventually, I got him a sweetheart of a plea deal that I had to twist his effing arm into taking. Quantities were for personal use, etc., do some treatment, everything goes away. There is one standout moment from a conversation he decided to have with the judge during one court appearance. "Are you employed, sir?" asked the judge, to which my client replied, "Yes, I'm an off-paper partner in a restaurant." Whatever that means. Sure doesn't sound like you're doing anything illegal there. The judge just rolled his eyes and let it go. One more rich junkie. About a year later, the guy got picked up again. Not quite as dramatic this time. Motor vehicle stop for poor driving, found tons of drugs and loose bullets in the car, just sort of rolling around on the floor. Client ended up firing me when I recommended that he get some actual treatment. End of story. Not sure how it all turned out for him. A long time ago also, I used to do some relationship property work, who gets what stuff after a couple splits up. In one case, I represented the woman. Her ex-partner was self-represented and he was totally crazy. He used to write long letters to my firm addressed to the managing partner, who was a commercial lawyer, not a litigator, so he had nothing to do with the case. The letters always explained at some length that he was physically perfect, over 6 feet tall, and a genius with an IQ of 150, and that he would unleash the dogs of war and crush us all if we opposed him. Speaking of dogs, one of the main aspects of his case is that he said that after he and my client split up, he bought a dog, then the dog died in a car crash because he was so sad after the breakup that he crashed his car, so now my client owed him money for the 3 years worth of dog food he'd supposedly bought. He used to ring me up and scream at me over the phone. He'd get naked and throw rocks at his neighbor's property. My client was terrified of him, and even I used to peer out of the elevator before leaving work at night in case he was waiting for me. The file was closed. Not a lawyer, but I know a guy who was interning in a law firm, and he ended up getting sued by one of the top lawyers at the firm for damages over a lost case folder. The lawyer ended up having to drop the suit a few days later when he discovered that, in the process of moving to a new office, he had just left the missing folder in his office. This was apparently also a rite of passage, and just about everybody who works at the firm had been sued by this lawyer at some point. I guess he hadn't been fired because they knew it would be a total nightmare. Not a lawyer yet, but I have an amazing job as a secretary in a law firm while I'm studying. I get to read our cases. Favorite current one. The new client comes in dressed flashy and very inappropriately. She works for a bank, almost like a P. Here's the situation, and it's weird as F. She was in a relationship with one of the bank's executives, the boss of her boss. All of a sudden, one of her coworkers, who apparently had put his eyes on her for a little while, made a move. She shot him down, but he wouldn't give up.
She then asked her boyfriend, the executive bloke, to get this man to stop, but he refused, so she dumped him. To get back at her, the executive then started dating our client's best friend. She now wants to file for harassment claims. Everything about this case is weird as F, and the people involved all behave like middle schoolers. Thank you for watching. Guys, thank you for all the support and the likes. Subscribe to the channel if you're not subscribed yet. See you next time.